The spring sun was warm on Sophia's face as she sat in the doctor's office, trying to make sense of the words hanging in the air between them. At just 19, words like lymphoma, stage 3, and aggressive treatment seemed to belong to someone else's life story, not her own. "I'm sorry, but we need to start chemotherapy right away," Dr. Chen said, her kind eyes meeting Sophia's. "The good news is this type of cancer responds well to treatment. The challenging part is getting you that treatment quickly." Sophia nodded, her mind racing ahead to what this all meant. No health insurance. Mom working 2 jobs already. Their tiny apartment barely big enough for the 2 of them. The numbers the billing department had mentioned earlier made her stomach drop. Thousands upon thousands of dollars they simply didn't have. "Do you have any questions?" Dr. Chen asked. A million, Sophia thought, but she only shook her head. "Not right now." The bus ride home felt surreal. People laughed, scrolled on phones, argued over seats. Normal life continuing all around while Sophia's world had just been turned upside down. She looked out the window at the city passing by, her reflection pale and scared looking back at her. Her mom, Rosa, was still at work when Sophia got home. Their apartment was small but filled with love, photos on every wall, handmade curtains, and Sophia's artwork everywhere. Her paintings and sketches had covered the refrigerator since she was little, then spread to the walls as she grew older. Now they hung in every room, bright spots of color and imagination. Sophia dropped her bag and went straight to her tiny bedroom, which doubled as her art studio. Half-finished canvases leaned against the walls. Paintbrushes stood in old coffee mugs, and her art school assignments were pinned above her desk. She'd been saving for art school since she was 14. Working weekend jobs and selling the occasional piece at local craft fairs. Now all that money would have to go toward staying alive. She picked up a brush and stared at her latest work, a landscape of rolling hills and bright wildflowers. Her art teacher had praised her use of color, her ability to capture light and hope. Hope. Sophia closed her eyes, the weight of her diagnosis pressing down on her chest until it was hard to breathe. When Rosa came home 3 hours later, Sophia was still painting, but now with a fierce intensity. The apartment smelled of acrylics and determination. "Mija, I'm home," Rosa called out, dropping her purse and kicking off her shoes. When she appeared in Sophia's doorway, her smile faded. "What's wrong?" "You've been crying." Sophia put down her brush. She'd practiced what to say a dozen times, but when the moment came, all she could do was hold out the paperwork from the doctor. Rosa's hands trembled as she read, her eyes filling with tears. "Oh, my baby," she whispered, pulling Sophia close. "My strong, beautiful girl." They held each other, crying together as the sunset painted the room in gold and pink, colors Sophia would have normally rushed to capture on canvas. "We'll figure this out," Rosa promised, wiping tears from her daughter's face. Somehow. That night, after her mother had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep, Sophia sat cross-legged on her bed, surrounded by sketches and paintings. She picked up each one, remembering when and why she'd created it. Art had always been her escape, her joy, her way of making sense of the world. Now it might be her salvation in a much more literal sense. An idea began to form, not just any idea, a lifeline. The next morning, Sophia woke before her mom and made coffee, the rich smell filling their small kitchen. When Rosa shuffled in, still looking tired after their emotional night, Sophia was ready. "I have a plan," she announced, pushing a mug toward her mother. "I'm going to sell my art." Rosa blinked, taking a sip of coffee. "Your art?" "All of it," Sophia said, gesturing around them at the paintings that decorated their home. "And I'll make more, lots more. I can set up in the park on weekends, maybe near where the farmer's market is. People are always walking through there." "Honey," Rosa began gently, "your art is beautiful, but nothing," Sophia interrupted. "I'm good, Mom. My professors have been telling me that. And I'm not just going to sit around waiting to—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Rosa reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. "You are good. You're amazing. But art doesn't sell quickly, and we need money for treatment now." "I've been thinking about that too," Sophia said, pulling out a notebook filled with numbers and plans. "I already talked to Dr. Chen this morning. She says we can work with the hospital on a payment plan. If I can make the first installment, we can start treatment while I raise the rest." Her mother looked doubtful but impressed by Sophia's research. "And how much is this first installment?" Sophia showed her the figure she'd circled 3 times in red pen. Rosa's eyes widened. "That's still a lot of money, mija." "I know, but I can do it. I have to try." Over the next few days, as the reality of her diagnosis sank in, Sophia threw herself into her plan. She stayed up late painting, created an online page to share her story, and asked permission from the park manager to set up a small stand on weekends. Her first physical symptoms began to appear: fatigue that dragged at her limbs, occasional night sweats that left her sheets damp and tangled. But rather than slow her down, these signs only made her work harder, as if she could outpace the disease growing inside her. On Friday evening, Rosa helped her select the best pieces to sell, landscapes mostly, but also some abstract works and a few portraits. "This one stays," Rosa insisted, pointing to a painting of the 2 of them at the beach, created from a selfie they'd taken on Sophia's 16th birthday. It was one of Sophia's best works, capturing not just their faces but the joy of that perfect day. Sophia nodded, throat tight with emotion. "That one stays," she agreed. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for the park. Sophia dressed carefully, choosing clothes that hid how much weight she'd already lost. She applied a little extra blush to bring color to her pale cheeks and tied a bright scarf around her head, partly for style, partly because she'd read that hair loss would come soon with the treatment. "How do I look?" she asked her mother, turning in a small circle. Rosa's eyes shimmered with tears and pride. "Beautiful. So beautiful." They loaded Sophia's paintings into their neighbor's borrowed truck, 20 canvases of various sizes, each representing hours of work and pieces of Sophia's heart. Rosa had made a simple sign: "Art sale, help a young artist fight cancer." Sophia had been unsure about being so direct, but her mother insisted. "People want to help," Rosa said firmly. "Let them." The park was already busy when they arrived, families spread on blankets, joggers weaving along paths, and the farmers' market in full swing. They found a spot near the main walkway and set up a folding table with Sophia's paintings displayed on portable easels around it. The first hour was discouraging. Many people walked by, some pausing to look, but most continuing on without speaking. Sophia felt her hope fading with each passing minute. What had seemed like such a brilliant plan in their kitchen now felt naive and impossible. "It's still early," Rosa encouraged, adjusting a painting that had tilted in the light breeze. "The right people haven't come by yet." Sophia nodded, but the tight knot in her stomach wasn't just from worry anymore. The fatigue was hitting hard, making it difficult to stand for long periods. She sat on their folding chair, smiling at passers-by while trying not to look as tired as she felt. An elderly woman stopped and spent several minutes examining a small landscape of the city skyline at sunset. "This is lovely," she said finally. "How much?" Sophia had struggled with pricing. Art school had taught her that artists often undervalued their work, but these weren't normal circumstances. $50, she said, hoping it wasn't too much. The woman smiled and reached into her purse. "I'll take it. My granddaughter just moved into her first apartment. This will be perfect for her." As the woman walked away with the carefully wrapped painting, Sophia felt a surge of hope. One sale. They'd made one sale. It wasn't enough, not nearly enough, but it was a start. By midday, they'd sold 3 more small pieces. The money was accumulating slowly in their cash box, each sale bringing them a tiny step closer to the sum they needed. But the big pieces, the ones that would really make a difference, remained unsold. The sun climbed higher, beating down on them. Sophia's energy was fading fast, the combination of her condition and the heat taking its toll. Rosa noticed and insisted she take a break. "Go sit in the shade for a while," she urged. "I'll watch the stand." Sophia didn't have the strength to argue. She found a bench under a large oak tree and sank onto it gratefully, closing her eyes against the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. She must have dozed off because she woke to her mother gently shaking her shoulder. "Mija, come back to the stand," Rosa said, excitement in her voice. "Someone wants to talk to you about your work." Sophia stood carefully, fighting a wave of dizziness. "Did we sell another one?" Rosa's smile widened. "Maybe, come and see." As they walked back to their little art display, Sophia noticed a tall man examining her largest canvas. A dreamlike scene of a girl standing at the edge of a forest filled with glowing lanterns. It was one of her most personal pieces, representing her own journey into the unknown. He turned as they approached, and Sophia was struck by the kindness in his eyes. He wasn't young, maybe in his 40s, with the weathered look of someone who had faced his own struggles in life. "Are you the artist?" he asked quietly. Sophia nodded. "Yes, I am." The days that followed were filled with both hope and struggle for Sophia. Every morning she woke up with determination burning in her chest even as her body grew weaker. The small success from that first weekend at the park had given her just enough money to make a tiny payment toward her treatment, but it wasn't nearly enough. "We need to go bigger," Sophia told her mother one evening as they sat at their small kitchen table. Rosa looked up from the bills she was sorting, dark circles under her eyes from working extra shifts. "What do you mean bigger? More paintings, more places to sell them." Sophia pushed her dinner around her plate, her appetite diminished by both worry and the early effects of her disease. "Maybe I can talk to some coffee shops about hanging my work. Or the community center." Rosa reached across the table and placed her hand over her daughter's. "You're pushing yourself too hard. The doctor said you need rest before treatment starts." "Rest won't pay the bills," Sophia replied, trying to keep the fear out of her voice. The deadline for her first major payment was approaching fast, and without it, her treatment would be delayed. Every day counted now. The next morning, despite her mother's concerns, Sophia packed up a portfolio of her smaller works and visited every coffee shop, bookstore, and local business within walking distance of their apartment. Most owners were sympathetic but non-committal. A few agreed to display one or two pieces. By the time she returned home, exhaustion had settled deep in her bones, but she had 3 new locations for her art. "See?" she told Rosa triumphantly, collapsing onto their worn couch. "Progress." Rosa just shook her head, worry etched across her face. "At what cost, mija?" "You can barely stand up." Sophia closed her eyes. "I'll rest tomorrow, promise." But tomorrow brought more of the same. More painting when she had the strength. More planning when she didn't. She created an online page to share her story and her art, spending hours figuring out how to make it look professional. A local art student she knew from school helped her take good photographs of her work and taught her how to post them online. "People will want to help," her friend assured her. "Your story will touch them." Sophia wasn't so sure. The world was full of sad stories, and she was just one more person needing help. Still, she wrote a short, honest description of her situation and posted it alongside images of her paintings. The park became her weekend home. Every Saturday and Sunday, no matter the weather, Sophia and Rosa set up their little stand among the food vendors and craft sellers. Some days were better than others. A rainy Sunday might bring only a handful of people stopping by, while a sunny Saturday could mean a steady stream of visitors. Yet sales remained frustratingly slow. People admired her work, expressed sympathy for her situation, sometimes even took her information with promises to think about a purchase. But the big sales, the ones that would make a real difference, never materialized. By the 3rd weekend, Sophia was noticeably thinner, her clothes hanging loosely on her frame. The scarf around her head was no longer just a fashion choice but a necessity, as her thick black hair had begun to thin despite not having started chemotherapy yet. "This isn't working fast enough," she admitted to her mother, as they packed up after another disappointing day. They'd sold only one small painting for $30. "At this rate, I'll be too sick to even come to the park before we raise enough money." Rosa helped her fold their display table, her movements slow with fatigue. "Maybe it's time to consider other options. My sister said we could come stay with her." "Her husband knows a doctor who might know," Sophia cut her off firmly. "We're not moving to Arizona. Your job is here. My school is here. Our life is here." She didn't add that her aunt's husband had always made it clear he thought Sophia's art was a waste of time, that she should pursue something practical instead. "Lives can change," Rosa said quietly. "Sometimes they have to." Sophia pretended not to hear, focusing instead on carefully wrapping her unsold paintings. Each one represented hours of work and a piece of herself, her dreams, her fears, her hope for the future. The thought of giving up made her chest tighten with something close to panic. That night sleep eluded her. Sophia lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing between fear and determination. The first major treatment payment was due in just 10 days. They weren't even halfway there. In the darkness of her room, surrounded by canvases and the smell of paint, Sophia finally allowed herself to cry. Not the careful tears she'd been showing her mother, but deep body-shaking sobs that left her gasping for air. She cried for the unfairness of it all, for the dreams that might never come true, for the fear that gnawed at her constantly now. When morning came, her eyes were swollen, but her resolve was stronger than ever. If the park and local shops weren't enough, she would find other ways. The next day, a Monday, Sophia skipped her art history class and instead took her stand to the busiest corner she could find, near the city's financial district. Setting up without a permit was risky, but she was past caring about rules. This was about survival. The business people rushing by barely glanced at her display. Occasionally someone would slow down, look curiously at her paintings, then hurry on. By lunchtime, Sophia was lightheaded from standing so long without eating, but she stubbornly remained at her post. A police officer eventually approached, his expression stern. "You can't set up here without a permit." "Miss," Sophia looked up at him, too tired to even feel properly worried. "I'm sorry. I'm just trying to sell my art. I need the money for medical treatment." Something in her face must have touched him because his expression softened slightly. "I understand, but rules are rules. You'll have to pack up." She nodded, beginning to gather her things with shaking hands. The officer watched for a moment, then sighed. "There's a weekly art walk downtown on Thursday evenings. You don't need a permit for that. The whole street is open to vendors. Might be a better spot for you." Sophia looked up, hope flickering. "Really? Where exactly?" He gave her directions and even helped her carry her paintings back to the bus stop. It wasn't the sale she'd hoped for, but it was information, and information could be valuable. Thursday evening found Sophia and Rosa setting up among dozens of other artists and craftspeople. The atmosphere was lively, with music playing and food vendors selling everything from tacos to gourmet popcorn. For the first time since her diagnosis, Sophia felt almost normal. Just another artist hoping to make a sale. Their spot wasn't ideal, tucked between a jewelry maker and a potter, whose elaborate displays made Sophia's simple setup look amateur by comparison. Still, the foot traffic was steady, and people seemed more inclined to browse than they had been at the park. "Your work is beautiful," the jewelry maker commented during a lull. "The way you use color, it's like your paintings are glowing from within." Sophia smiled, genuinely touched. "Thank you. That means a lot." "I noticed your sign," the woman continued, nodding toward the small card explaining that sales would go toward cancer treatment. "My mother had lymphoma too. She's 5 years cancer-free now." "Really?" Sophia felt a surge of hope. "That's wonderful." It was tough, especially financially, but she made it through. The woman hesitated, then added, "Have you considered approaching any galleries?" "Your work is certainly good enough," Sophia shook her head. "Galleries take time, and they usually want an established artist with a cohesive collection. I'm just a student." "Still," the woman insisted, "it might be worth a try. There's a small gallery 3 blocks from here, the Urban Canvas. The owner, Bill, is a good person. Tell him Grace sent you." Sophia thanked her, tucking the information away for later. Right now, she needed to focus on making sales tonight. As the evening progressed, more people stopped to look at her work. An elderly couple purchased a small landscape that reminded them of where they'd honeymooned. A young woman bought a bright abstract piece for her new apartment. Each sale brought a moment of joy and relief, but also the sobering awareness of how far they still had to go. By the time they packed up at 10 o'clock, Sophia was swaying on her feet with exhaustion. They'd sold 4 paintings, their best night yet, but she'd pushed herself far too hard. "That's it," Rosa declared as they loaded the last canvas into their neighbor's borrowed car. "No more for this week. You need to rest." For once, Sophia didn't argue. The weakness that had been creeping up on her for weeks had suddenly become overwhelming. Even holding a paintbrush had become difficult lately, her hands shaking with fatigue. The next morning, she couldn't get out of bed. Rosa called in sick to work and spent the day bringing her soup and tea. Worry etched into every line of her face. "I'm taking you to the doctor," she announced when Sophia's fever reached 101. The emergency room was crowded and noisy. They waited for hours before a harried doctor confirmed what they already feared. Sophia's condition was worsening. Without treatment soon things would only get worse. We're trying, Sophia told him weakly. We're raising the money. The doctor looked at her with a mixture of sympathy and frustration. There are programs that might help. Financial assistance. Let me have someone from billing talk to you. The billing specialist was kind but not encouraging. Yes, there were programs, but they had waiting lists. Yes, they could set up a payment plan, but they still needed a substantial down payment before treatment could begin. No, they couldn't accept promises of future art sales as collateral. They returned home with a new stack of paperwork and diminishing hope. Maybe my sister is right, Rosa said quietly as she helped Sophia back into bed. Maybe we should go to Arizona. Sophia closed her eyes, too tired to argue anymore. Maybe her mother was right. Maybe it was time to accept defeat. The next day, though she was still weak, Sophia insisted on going to the gallery Grace had mentioned. It can't hurt to try, she told her mother. And it's on the way to the pharmacy anyway. The urban canvas was smaller than Sophia had expected, tucked between a vintage clothing store and a cafe. The front window displayed a striking metal sculpture and several abstract paintings. A small sign indicated they were open. Inside, the space was bright and airy, with white walls and polished concrete floors. A few visitors wandered among the displays, speaking in hushed tones as if they were in a museum rather than a commercial gallery. Sophia approached the desk where a middle-aged man was working on a laptop. "Excuse me?" she began nervously. "Are you Bill? Grace from the Art Walk sent me. She thought you might be interested in my work." The man looked up, his expression unreadable behind round glasses. "Grace has good taste," he said after a moment. "Do you have anything I can look at?" Sophia had brought only 3 small paintings, chosen hastily that morning. She placed them carefully on the desk, suddenly aware of how amateur they might seem in this professional setting. Bill studied each one silently, occasionally making a small sound that could have meant anything. Finally, he looked up at Sophia. "These are interesting. You have a distinctive style. Are you formally trained?" "I'm a student at the Art Institute." "Or I was before." She gestured vaguely, not wanting to launch into her whole sad story. Bill nodded, returning his attention to the paintings. "I'm afraid I don't have space in my current exhibition schedule. We're booked solid for the next 6 months. Sophia's heart sank. 6 months might as well be 6 years in her current situation. "I understand," she said, reaching to gather her paintings. "Thank you for taking the time to look. However," Bill continued, holding up a hand to stop her, "I do have a community wall in the back room. Local artists, rotating display. Less visibility than the main gallery, but still good exposure. I could put these up there, if you're interested." It wasn't the solution she'd hoped for, but it was something. "Yes, please." "That would be wonderful." They discussed details, how long the display would last, what percentage the gallery would take from any sales, how to price the work. Sophia listened carefully, trying to focus despite the fatigue that made even standing difficult. As she was leaving, paperwork completed and paintings left behind, Bill called after her. "There's an art benefit coming up next weekend, for the Children's Hospital. A lot of collectors attend. If you have more work, you might consider submitting something for the auction." Sophia thanked him, tucking the information flyer into her bag. One more possibility, one more small chance. The weekend arrived with Sophia too weak to return to the park. Rosa set up their stand alone, leaving their neighbor's teenage son to sit with Sophia. "Call me if anything changes," Rosa instructed both of them firmly. "Anything at all." Sophia spent the day drifting in and out of sleep, occasionally working on a new painting when she had the strength. This one was different from her usual work, darker, more intense. It showed a young woman standing at the edge of a stormy sea, her back to the viewer facing the turbulent waters. In one hand she held a paintbrush, in the other a glowing light that pushed back against the darkness. She was still working on it when Rosa returned, looking tired but strangely excited. "How did it go?" Sophia asked, putting down her brush. "2 sales," Rosa replied. "Small ones. But that's not all." She sat on the edge of Sophia's bed. "A man came by asking about you specifically. He said he saw your work in that gallery, the urban something." "The urban canvas?" Sophia sat up straighter. "What did he say?" "He wants to see more of your work." "He left his card?" Rosa pulled it from her pocket and handed it to Sophia. "He said to call him any time." The card was simple, cream-colored with elegant black text, "Michael Anderson." Art collector. Below that was a phone number and email address. Nothing more. Sophia turned the card over in her hands, a small flutter of hope stirring in her chest. Did he buy anything? No, Rosa admitted, but he seemed very interested. He asked a lot of questions about your background, your influences. He seemed to really understand art. It might be nothing, Sophia knew. Just another person expressing interest without following through. Still, it was the most promising lead they'd had. I'll call him tomorrow, she decided, after I finish this painting. She worked late into the night, ignoring her mother's pleas to rest. This painting felt important somehow, as if she was pouring not just her skill but her entire life force into it. By the time she finally put down her brush, the clock read 3:17 a.m. Sophia stepped back to look at the finished piece. It was the best thing she'd ever created, raw, powerful, and undeniably alive with emotion. If this didn't move people, nothing would. She collapsed into bed, exhaustion finally overwhelming her. For the first time in weeks, she slept deeply and without dreams. The next day was Sunday. Their payment deadline was Tuesday. Despite feeling worse than ever, Sophia insisted on returning to the park with Rosa for one last attempt at raising the remaining money. And I want to bring this, she said, carefully wrapping the painting she'd finished during the night. It might be the one that makes a difference. The park was quieter than usual, the morning air cool and crisp with the promise of autumn. They set up their stand in the usual spot, arranging the paintings with Sophia's new piece prominently displayed in the center. Rosa looked at it properly for the first time and gasped softly. Oh, mija, this is something special. Sophia just nodded, too tired for words. She sat in their folding chair, wrapped in a sweater despite the day's growing warmth, and waited. For what, she wasn't entirely sure anymore. A miracle, perhaps, or at least enough sales to give them a fighting chance. The hours passed slowly. A few regulars stopped by, expressing concern at Sophia's obvious decline. An art teacher from the community college spent nearly 30 minutes discussing technique and offering encouragement. A young couple bought a small seascape for their bathroom, but the major sales they needed simply didn't materialize. By mid-afternoon, Sophia's fever had returned and Rosa was insisting they pack up early. Just a little longer, Sophia pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. Someone might still come. Rosa looked at her daughter, pale, thin, fighting with everything she had, and couldn't deny her. One more hour. Then we go home, no arguments. Sophia nodded gratefully, closing her eyes against the dizziness that threatened to overwhelm her. She must have dozed off because she woke to the sound of a male voice talking quietly with her mother. Forcing her eyes open, Sophia saw a tall man standing before her display, his attention focused on her newest painting. The tall man stood motionless before Sophia's painting, studying it with an intensity that made her nervous. He wasn't young, maybe mid-40s, with dark hair peppered with gray at the temples. His clothes were simple but well-made, and he carried himself with a quiet confidence. Your daughter painted this? He asked Rosa, still not taking his eyes off the canvas. Yes, Rosa answered, glancing worriedly at Sophia. Everything here is her work. Finally, the man turned to look at Sophia, and she was struck by his eyes, warm brown with tiny crinkles at the corners, as if he smiled often. But he wasn't smiling now. Instead, his expression was thoughtful, almost puzzled. I'm Tom, he said simply, extending his hand, and you're the artist. It wasn't a question, but Sophia nodded anyway, struggling to sit up straighter in her chair. Sophia, she replied, her voice sounding weak even to her own ears. His hand was warm and solid around hers, the grip gentle but firm. Your work is extraordinary, he said, releasing her hand and turning back to the paintings, especially this one. He gestured toward her latest piece, the stormy seascape with the woman holding light against darkness. Thank you, Sophia managed, a flutter of hope rising in her chest. Was this the miracle they'd been waiting for? A genuine collector who appreciated her work? How long have you been painting? Tom asked, moving to examine her other pieces. Since I was little, Sophia replied, but seriously for about 4 years now. I was in art school until you got sick, he finished for her, nodding toward their sign explaining the purpose of the sale. Sophia nodded, suddenly embarrassed. It felt like begging, though her mother assured her it was just being honest. Tom continued to move slowly around their display, occasionally stopping to look more closely at a particular piece. He asked questions about her technique, her influences, what inspired certain paintings. Despite her exhaustion, Sophia found herself engaging enthusiastically, talking about her art in a way she rarely got to do with customers. After nearly 20 minutes of conversation, during which Rosa hovered nervously nearby, Tom returned to stand before the stormy seascape. "How much?" he asked simply. Sophia hesitated. She'd priced this piece higher than any of her others, partly because of the time it had taken, partly because she knew it was her best work, and partly out of desperation as their deadline approached. $300, she said finally, holding her breath. Tom's expression didn't change. "That's significantly underpriced," he said matter-of-factly. Sophia blinked, unsure how to respond. Was he haggling? Criticizing her pricing strategy? "I'll take it," he continued before she could speak. "And I'd like to see more of your work. Do you have a portfolio? A website?" Yes, I have an online page," Sophia stammered, fumbling in her pocket for one of the simple business cards she'd printed at the library. "Everything available is here today, though. The rest is either sold or hanging in your home," Rosa finished for her. "We've been selling everything we can." Tom took the card, studying it briefly before tucking it into his jacket pocket. Then he reached for his wallet. "I'll pay for this now," he said, pulling out several crisp bills. "But I'd like to talk more about your work in a more comfortable setting. You're clearly not feeling well." That was an understatement. Sophia could feel her strength fading by the minute, the excitement of a potential sale temporarily masking her symptoms, but not eliminating them. "Maybe we could meet at a coffee shop tomorrow," she suggested hopefully. Tom glanced at Rosa, a silent communication passing between them, adult to adult, both concerned about the pale young woman before them. "Perhaps I could stop by your home instead," he suggested gently. "That might be easier for you." Under normal circumstances, Rosa would never have agreed to a stranger visiting their apartment, but these weren't normal circumstances, and something about Tom's manner inspired trust. After a brief discussion, they agreed he would come to their place the following afternoon. The rest of the day passed in a blur for Sophia. They packed up earlier than usual, her newest painting carefully wrapped for its new owner. Tom helped them carry everything to the bus stop, his strength making quick work of what would have been an exhausting task for the two women. As he was leaving, he paused, looking at Sophia with that same thoughtful expression. "Try to rest," he said quietly. "Art will wait for you to heal." The bus ride home was silent, both women lost in their own thoughts. The $300 was a welcome addition to their fund, but still far short of what they needed by Tuesday. "He seemed nice," Rosa said finally as they entered their apartment. "Like he really understands art." Sophia nodded, sinking onto the couch, too tired to even make it to her bedroom. "Did you notice he didn't haggle? Most people try to talk me down on price." "Maybe he's a real collector," Rosa suggested, bringing a glass of water and Sophia's medication. "Maybe he'll buy more tomorrow." "Maybe," Sophia agreed, though she didn't dare hope too strongly. Life had taught her that miracles were rare and usually came with conditions. That night, her fever spiked again. Rosa spent hours placing cool cloths on her forehead, threatening more than once to take her to the emergency room. Sophia refused, knowing they couldn't afford another medical bill. By morning, the fever had broken, leaving Sophia weak but clear-headed. She spent most of the day sleeping, waking only when Rosa insisted she eat something. The thought of Tom's visit later kept her going. One last chance to make a significant sale. At 3 o'clock, their doorbell rang. Rosa hurried to answer it while Sophia sat up on the couch trying to look less ill than she felt. She'd put on a clean shirt and fixed her scarf, but there was no hiding the dark circles under her eyes or the sharp angles of her too thin face. Tom entered their small living room, looking somehow larger than Sophia remembered. He carried a leather portfolio case and a small bakery box, which he handed to Rosa with a smile. "I thought something sweet might be welcome," he said simply. The bakery down the street recommended their cinnamon rolls. It was such a thoughtful gesture that Sophia felt tears spring to her eyes. She blinked them away quickly, embarrassed by her emotional reaction. "Thank you," she said as Rosa went to the kitchen for plates. "That was very kind." Tom waved away her thanks, his attention already captured by the paintings that decorated the apartment. "These are all yours too?" he asked, moving to examine a vibrant landscape hanging near the window. Sophia nodded. "Most of them. I've been selling the ones I can part with." "And the ones you can't?" he asked, turning to look at her. She gestured toward a portrait of her mother hanging above the television. "Some are too personal." Tom nodded, understanding, continuing his slow circuit of the room. Unlike many visitors who quickly glanced at her work before making polite comments, he took time with each piece, studying it from different angles, occasionally leaning in to examine a particular detail. When Rosa returned with coffee and the cinnamon rolls, they sat around the small coffee table. Tom placed his portfolio case carefully to one side, accepting a mug with thanks. "I should explain why I'm here," he said after taking a sip. "I'm not just a collector. I own a gallery downtown, the Modern Vision." Sophia's eyes widened. The Modern Vision was one of the city's most prestigious galleries, known for launching significant careers. Most artists would give anything for a showing there. "You're that Tom?" she breathed. "Tom Reynolds?" He smiled slightly. "You've heard of me? My professors talk about your gallery all the time. It's where everyone wants to show." "With good reason," he acknowledged without false modesty. "We're selective, and we have an excellent track record of placing artists with serious collectors." Rosa looked between them, clearly not understanding the significance but sensing it was important. "This is good news?" she asked Sophia. "It's amazing news," Sophia confirmed, her heart racing despite her weakness. "Mr. Reynolds, Tom, please." "Tom," she corrected. "Does this mean you're interested in my work, for your gallery?" He leaned back, considering his words carefully. "What I saw yesterday intrigued me, particularly your latest piece. It's raw, emotional work. Not technically perfect, but powerful. There's something there that can't be taught." Sophia waited, hardly daring to breathe. "However," he continued, "a single powerful piece doesn't necessarily translate to a cohesive body of work, ready for gallery presentation." Her hope began to deflate. "That's why I brought this," he added, reaching for his portfolio case. "I'd like to see more of what you can do, not what you think will sell at the park, but what you would create if you weren't worried about medical bills." The distinction struck Sophia forcefully. She hadn't realized how much her financial desperation had been influencing her artistic choices, pushing her towards safer, more commercial subjects rather than the deeply personal work that truly expressed her vision. Tom opened the case, revealing a selection of high-quality art supplies, premium paints, brushes, and several stretched canvases. "Consider this a commission," he said, placing the case on the coffee table. "I'm asking you to create 3 new pieces over the next month. Work that represents your true artistic voice without concern for marketability. I'll pay you in advance now and the balance when the work is completed." Sophia stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "An advance? How much?" $5,000, he replied calmly, as if the sum were inconsequential, with 5,000 more on completion, assuming the work meets my expectations. Rosa gasped softly. $5,000 would cover Sophia's immediate medical needs with money to spare. It was more than they had dared to hope for. "Why?" Sophia asked, unable to stop herself. "Why would you take such a risk on an unknown student?" Tom's expression softened. "Because 30 years ago I was you. Sick, broke, trying to make art while the world fell apart around me. Someone took a chance on me then. I'm just paying it forward." There was more to the story, Sophia sensed. Something personal that had brought him to their park on that particular day. But she didn't press for details. "There must be conditions," she said instead. "What exactly do you want from me?" "Honesty," he replied immediately. "I want work that tells the truth about your experience, not what you think I want to see. No commercial considerations, no trying to please the market. Just your authentic vision. Sophia nodded slowly. And if you don't like what I create? Then you keep the advance. No strings attached. But I don't think that will happen. He smiled slightly. I have a good eye for talent. I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe in your potential. As they discussed details, deadlines, themes, technical expectations, Sophia felt something shift inside her. For weeks, her art had been nothing but a means to an end, a way to pay for treatment. Now suddenly it was being valued for itself, for the vision and emotion it contained. By the time Tom left, they had a formal agreement. Rosa would pick up a check from his gallery the following morning, and Sophia would begin work as soon as she felt able. The relief of having the money for treatment gave her new energy, despite her physical weakness. I still can't believe it, Rosa said after closing the door behind him. It's like a miracle. Sophia looked at the art supplies he'd left, running her fingers over the expensive brushes. Not a miracle, she corrected softly. Recognition. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Rosa deposited Tom's check and made the necessary arrangements with the hospital. Sophia's first treatment was scheduled for Thursday, just 2 days away. Despite her mother's insistence that she rest, Sophia couldn't stop thinking about the commission. Ideas were already forming, images taking shape in her mind. She made sketches when she had the strength, planning the 3 pieces Tom had requested. The night before her first chemotherapy session, Sophia sat in her bedroom surrounded by these sketches. Fear and hope battled within her. Fear of the treatment and its effects, hope that it would work, that she would live to create all the art still inside her. She picked up one sketch that had emerged almost without conscious thought. A figure suspended between earth and sky, neither falling nor flying, caught in the moment of transition. It captured exactly how she felt, caught between health and illness, between student and professional artist, between the old life and whatever came next. This would be the first piece for Tom, she decided. A beginning. Thursday morning arrived bright and clear. Rosa took the day off work to accompany Sophia to the hospital. They were both nervous, though trying not to show it. Everything will be fine, Rosa said as they waited in the treatment center. The doctor says your type of lymphoma responds well to chemo. Sophia nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She was only 19. This wasn't supposed to be happening to her. As the nurse prepared the IV, Sophia closed her eyes, thinking of Tom's words. Honesty. Work that tells the truth about your experience. Well, this was her experience now. The cold hospital room, the antiseptic smell, the fear that no amount of positive thinking could entirely banish. The treatment itself was anticlimactic. No immediate pain, no dramatic side effects, just clear fluid dripping slowly into her vein, while she and Rosa watched mindless television to pass the time. That's it for today, the nurse said finally, removing the IV with practiced efficiency. You did great. Remember everything we discussed about managing side effects at home. And call immediately if you experience any of the symptoms on this list. She handed Sophia a printed sheet, which Rosa promptly took, knowing Sophia was too overwhelmed to absorb the information. The ride home was quiet, both women lost in their own thoughts. Sophia felt strange, not sick exactly, but not normal either, as if her body had become a battleground with forces she couldn't see fighting for control. You should rest, Rosa said when they arrived home. The doctor said the first few days can be rough. Sophia nodded, but instead of going to her bedroom, she went to her small art space. Tom's supplies waited there untouched since his visit. Misha, please, Rosa pleaded. You need to take care of yourself now. This is taking care of myself, Sophia replied, picking up a brush. I need to do this, Mom. I need to remember that I'm more than a patient. Rosa sighed but didn't argue further. She knew her daughter well enough to recognize that stubborn set of her jaw. Sophia worked for only an hour before exhaustion forced her to stop. It wasn't much, just the basic composition sketched onto canvas, a few areas of base color, but it was a start. A declaration that cancer might claim her body for a while, but it wouldn't claim her spirit or her art. The next few days were harder. The side effects hit with a vengeance. Nausea that made eating impossible, bone-deep fatigue, a metallic taste that made everything unpalatable. Sophia slept most of the time, waking only when Rosa insisted she drink water or take medication. A week after her first treatment, she managed to sit up in bed long enough to look at the unfinished canvas across the room. It seemed to accuse her with its emptiness, its unfulfilled potential. "Soon," she whispered to it. "I'll come back to you soon." True to her word, as soon as she could stand without dizziness, Sophia returned to her painting. Working in short bursts between rest periods, she slowly brought the image in her mind to life on canvas. The suspended figure took shape. Neither male nor female, neither young nor old, but unmistakably human in its vulnerability and strength. Rosa watched with a mixture of concern and pride. "You should pace yourself," she cautioned. "You have time." But Sophia wasn't sure about that. None of them knew if the treatment would work, if her particular cancer would respond as hoped. Every day she could hold a brush felt like a gift that might not be repeated. 2 weeks after her first treatment, Tom called to check on her progress. "I understand if you haven't been able to work much," he said when Sophia explained about the chemotherapy. "Your health comes first." "I've started the first piece," she told him. "It's different from what I've done before." "Different how?" Sophia struggled to put it into words. "More honest, I guess. Less concerned with making something beautiful and more with making something true." There was a pause. Then Tom's voice, warm with approval. "That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. Art isn't about beauty, at least not only about beauty. It's about truth." His encouragement renewed her determination. After they hung up, Sophia returned to her canvas with fresh energy, working until Rosa insisted she eat something. The days fell into a new rhythm. Treatment, recovery, painting when she could. Sophia's body weakened, but her art grew stronger, more focused, more authentic. The first canvas was completed just before her third chemotherapy session. The second started immediately after. Throughout it all, Tom remained a steady presence. He never pushed or pressured, but his belief in her talent gave Sophia something to hold on to when the side effects were at their worst. 1 month after his first visit, exactly as agreed, Sophia completed the third painting. It was the most difficult, a piece that confronted death directly, not with fear but with a clear-eyed recognition of its reality and its place in the cycle of life. "Are you sure about this one?" Rosa asked nervously when she saw it. "It's so intense." "That's why it needs to exist," Sophia replied simply. "It's part of the truth I promised to tell." Tom came to their apartment the next day to view the completed works. Sophia had arranged them in sequence: transition, treatment, transcendence, creating a narrative that reflected her journey. He stood before each one for a long time, saying nothing. Sophia waited anxiously, unable to read his expression. Had she failed? Was the work too personal, too raw for commercial consideration? Finally, Tom turned to her and she was startled to see tears in his eyes. "This?" he said, gesturing to the paintings. "This is what art is supposed to do. Make us feel, make us think, make us recognize our common humanity." Tom's unexpected emotional response to Sophia's paintings left her speechless. For a moment they all stood in silence, Sophia, Rosa, and Tom, bound together by the raw honesty captured on those 3 canvases. "I knew you had talent," Tom said finally, his voice steady again, "but this exceeds my expectations. These aren't student works. They're the beginning of a serious artistic voice." Sophia felt warmth spread through her chest, not the fever heat that had become too familiar, but the gentle glow of recognition, of being truly seen. "Thank you," she said simply, not trusting herself to say more without crying. Tom nodded, turning back to the paintings. "I'd like to display these at the gallery. Not in a group show or a back room, but featured in the main space." Rosa gasped softly beside her. "Really, you would do that?" "It's not charity," Tom said firmly, looking between them. "I only show work I believe in, work that deserves to be seen. These pieces qualify on their own merit, regardless of the circumstances of their creation." He paused, then added more softly, "Though I think those circumstances add another dimension of meaning that collectors will respond to." Sophia felt a flicker of unease. "I don't want to be the cancer artist. I don't want people to buy my work out of pity." "That's not what I'm suggesting," Tom assured her. "Your work stands on its own. But art doesn't exist in a vacuum. The story behind it adds context, helps people connect. Think of Frida Kahlo's paintings of her physical suffering, or Matisse's paper cutouts created when he could no longer stand at an easel. Understanding those circumstances deepens our appreciation without diminishing the work itself. Put that way, it made sense to Sophia. Her illness was part of her truth, part of what had shaped these particular paintings. Pretending otherwise would be its own form of dishonesty. "When would you want to show them?" she asked. "I have an opening next week for a sculpture exhibition. The main wall was reserved for a painter who had to withdraw unexpectedly. Your work would fill that space perfectly." Tom looked at Sophia carefully. "Is that too soon for you health-wise?" The next week would be just after her 4th chemotherapy session, traditionally when she felt her worst. But the opportunity was too important to miss. "I'll be there," Sophia said firmly, ignoring her mother's worried glance, "even if I have to come in a wheelchair." Tom smiled slightly. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that. But the offer stands either way." They spent the next hour discussing details, pricing, commission percentages, how the work would be presented. Tom was generous with his terms, offering Sophia a higher percentage than was standard for a new artist. By the time he left, carrying the 3 paintings carefully wrapped for transport, Sophia was both exhausted and exhilarated. "This could change everything," she told Rosa after Tom had gone. "If my work sells at those prices." "When?" Rosa corrected gently. "When your work sells." Sophia smiled at her mother's faith. "When my work sells," she amended, "we won't have to worry so much about medical bills. I could go back to school maybe, finish my degree." "One step at a time," Rosa cautioned, though her eyes shone with the same hope. "First, let's focus on getting through this next treatment." The 4th chemotherapy session was indeed brutal. Something about the cumulative effect of the treatments left Sophia weaker than ever before. For 3 days afterward, she barely left her bed, too nauseated and exhausted to do more than sleep, and occasionally sip the ginger tea Rosa prepared. On the 4th day, when she finally felt strong enough to sit up, Rosa showed her the gallery announcement that had arrived by email. There was Sophia's name, prominently featured alongside established artists. And more than that, one of her paintings had been chosen as the feature image for the online invitation. "They chose my work for the main publicity," Sophia whispered, staring at the screen. "Out of all those artists, because it's powerful," Rosa said simply. "Anyone can see that." The day of the opening, Sophia woke feeling stronger than she had in weeks. Whether it was the excitement of the evening ahead or a sign that the treatment was starting to work, she didn't know. But she welcomed the energy. She spent a long time deciding what to wear, wanting to look professional but also comfortable enough to last through the evening. In the end, she chose a simple black dress with a colorful scarf that complemented her favorite painting. The scarf served the dual purpose of adding color to her outfit and covering her thinning hair. "You look beautiful," Rosa said when Sophia emerged from her bedroom. "Like a real artist," Sophia laughed. "I am a real artist, Mom, with or without the fancy clothes." "You know what I mean," Rosa replied, fussing with Sophia's scarf. "Professional. Ready for your big night." They arrived at the gallery 30 minutes before the official opening. Tom met them at the door, looking elegant in a charcoal gray suit. "Right on time," he said, ushering them inside. "I want to show you the display before everyone arrives." The gallery was larger and more impressive than Sophia had imagined, with high ceilings, polished concrete floors, and sophisticated lighting. Various sculptures occupied the central space, their forms casting interesting shadows in the carefully directed light. But it was the far wall that drew Sophia's attention immediately. Her 3 paintings hung side by side, perfectly lit to highlight their emotional intensity. They looked different here, more powerful somehow, more significant than they had in her small bedroom. "Oh," she breathed, moving closer. "They look like they belong," Tom finished for her. "Because they do." Sophia stood before her work, seeing it with new eyes in this professional setting. The journey she'd captured, from diagnosis through treatment to a hard-won peace with mortality, felt universal here, not just her personal story. "We've already had interest," Tom told her quietly. "Several regular collectors called after seeing the online preview. And a museum curator asked about you yesterday. Wanted to know if you were working on a larger series with the same theme." Sophia turned to him, startled. A museum curator? Already? Tom nodded, clearly pleased by her reaction. The West Side Contemporary. They're small but respected. They're planning an exhibition on art and healing next year. Your work would be perfect. Before Sophia could process this new development, the gallery assistant appeared to let Tom know the first guests had arrived. From that moment on, the evening became a whirlwind of introductions, conversations, and unexpected connections. People Sophia had only read about in art magazines or heard mentioned by her professors were suddenly shaking her hand, asking thoughtful questions about her process, offering insights into her work that she hadn't even considered herself. Your use of light as both subject and technique is fascinating, one older woman told her, gesturing toward the third painting. The way you've created a sense of illumination from within the canvas itself. Sophia nodded, trying to look as though this had been an intentional artistic decision rather than intuitive expression. The woman, it turned out, was a retired art history professor who now wrote influential reviews for several publications. Throughout the evening, Sophia noticed small red dots appearing beside her paintings, the gallery's system for marking sold works. First one, then another, and finally the third, all sold within 2 hours of the opening. Tom appeared at her elbow as she was speaking with a young couple who had purchased her first painting. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly when they moved away. "I'm good," Sophia assured him, though in truth she was beginning to feel the familiar fatigue creeping in. "Just a little overwhelmed. Understandable. It's not every day you sell out your first show in under 2 hours." He smiled slightly. "Perhaps you should sit for a while." "There's a small room in the back where you can rest if needed." Sophia shook her head. "Not yet. I want to meet everyone who bought my work. To thank them." It was important to her that the buyers understand her gratitude went beyond the financial transaction. Each sale represented not just money for medical treatment, but belief in her as an artist, validation of her vision. By the time the gallery began to empty, Sophia was swaying slightly on her feet, her energy completely depleted. Rosa, who had been watching her daughter carefully all evening, finally stepped in. "We need to get you home," she said firmly. "You've done more than enough for one night." Tom agreed, calling a car service for them rather than making them wait for the bus. As they prepared to leave, he handed Sophia an envelope. "Your portion of tonight's sales," he explained. "Normally we'd settle accounts at the end of the exhibition, but I thought you might need this sooner." Inside the envelope was a check for more than Sophia had expected, far more. Between this and the commission payment, they would have enough to cover her remaining treatments with money left over. "I don't know how to thank you," she began, but Tom shook his head. "Don't thank me. This is money you earned through your talent and hard work. I'm just the facilitator." He walked them to the waiting car, adding as they got in, "Rest this weekend, but call me Monday. We need to discuss your next steps. The interest in your work tonight suggests this is just the beginning." The ride home passed in a blur of exhaustion and elation. Rosa kept one arm around Sophia's shoulders, supporting her physically, while they both tried to absorb the evening's success. "I knew you could do it," Rosa said softly. "From the first time you picked up a crayon, I knew you had something special." Sophia leaned against her mother, too tired to speak but filled with gratitude for the woman who had never stopped believing in her, even when hope seemed foolish. The weekend was a time of much-needed recovery. Sophia slept most of Saturday, her body demanding rest after the excitement and exertion of the gallery opening. By Sunday, though, she felt well enough to sit in the living room and begin sketching ideas for new works. Her hands were weaker than before, sometimes trembling with the lingering effects of the chemotherapy, but her artistic vision seemed sharper somehow, more focused, as if facing death had stripped away everything extraneous, leaving only what truly mattered. On Monday morning, Sophia called Tom as promised. His enthusiasm was evident even through the phone. "I've had 3 more inquiries about your work," he told her, including a collector from New York who specializes in emerging artists dealing with medical themes. "Medical themes," Sophia repeated, frowning slightly. "So I am becoming the cancer artist after all." "No," Tom said firmly. "You're an artist whose current work happens to be informed by your experience with illness. That's not all you are or all you'll ever be. But right now, it's a strength, not a limitation. It gives your work a depth and authenticity that people respond to." He was right, Sophia knew. Her illness had changed her art, pushing it in directions she might never have explored otherwise. The key was to use that experience without being defined by it. "So what happens next?" she asked. "That depends on you," Tom replied. "How's your health? Are you able to work on new pieces?" Sophia looked down at the sketches scattered around her. "Yes, I think so. The doctors say my cancer is responding well to treatment. I still have bad days, but the good days are getting better. Then I'd suggest a small solo exhibition, perhaps 3 months from now. Enough time for you to create a cohesive body of work without putting too much pressure on your recovery." A solo exhibition. The word sent a thrill through Sophia's body. It was what every young artist dreamed of, but few achieved, especially so early in their careers. "I'd need at least 8 to 10 new pieces," she said, thinking aloud. "Maybe more if some are smaller." "Don't focus on quantity," Tom advised. "Quality and cohesion are more important. 5 exceptional paintings that work together thematically would be better than 10 unrelated pieces." They discussed possible themes, technical considerations, and practical logistics. By the end of the call, Sophia had a clear direction and a tentative timeline. It would be challenging, especially while continuing treatment, but the prospect energized her in a way nothing else had since her diagnosis. As the weeks passed, Sophia fell into a new routine. Treatment days were still difficult, often leaving her too ill to do more than sleep. But as her body gradually adjusted to the chemotherapy, the recovery periods grew shorter. On her good days, she painted with a focus and intensity that surprised even herself. Tom visited regularly, offering guidance without imposing his vision. "These are your stories to tell," he reminded her. "I'm just helping you find the most effective way to tell them." The new work was different from anything Sophia had created before. While the 3 paintings for the gallery had been raw and immediate, reflecting the shock and fear of her initial diagnosis, these newer pieces had a more reflective quality. They explored not just the experience of illness but the unexpected gifts it brought, a deeper appreciation for life's fragility, a clearer sense of what truly mattered, connections forged in the crucible of suffering. One painting in particular seemed to resonate with everyone who saw it. It showed a young woman, clearly a self-portrait though somewhat abstracted, standing in a field of medical equipment that was gradually transforming into flowers. Where IV poles had stood, lilies now grew. Hospital monitors became sunflowers. Pill bottles transformed into delicate bluebells. "This is the one," Tom said when he first saw it. "This is the centerpiece for your exhibition." Rosa agreed, though for different reasons. "It has hope in it," she said simply. "The others show the truth of suffering. This one shows the truth of healing." By the time Sophia completed her final chemotherapy session, she had finished 7 paintings for the exhibition. 7 felt right, a number that had always seemed lucky to her. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, saying her cancer was in remission, though they would need to monitor her closely for at least a year. Tom had arranged for the exhibition to open exactly 6 months after her first show at the gallery. The timing felt symbolic, marking half a year of growth as both an artist and a cancer survivor. The night before the opening, Sophia stood in the gallery looking at her work displayed professionally for the second time. The difference between these paintings and her earlier ones was striking, not just in technique, which had grown more assured, but in emotional depth. "I can see your whole journey here," Tom said, standing beside her. "From fear to acceptance to something beyond both. It's powerful storytelling." Sophia nodded, unable to find words for the complex emotions she felt. Pride in what she'd accomplished, gratitude for having survived to create this work, anxiety about how it would be received, and beneath it all, a quiet certainty that regardless of what happened next, this moment was enough. She had transformed her suffering into something meaningful, something that might help others face their own dark moments. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said finally, "thank you for giving me this chance. For seeing something in my work when I was just a sick girl selling paintings in the park." Tom smiled, shaking his head slightly. "You were never just anything, Sophia. You were an artist waiting to be discovered, by the world and by yourself." The opening night exceeded everyone's expectations. The gallery was packed, with attendees spilling onto the sidewalk outside. Art critics mingled with collectors, fellow artists, and medical professionals who had been invited specifically because of the exhibition's theme. Sophia's oncologist, Dr. Chen, arrived early, her eyes widening as she took in the transformation of her patient's experience into art. "This is extraordinary," she told Sophia. "I've been treating cancer patients for 20 years and I've never seen the journey captured so honestly or so beautifully." One by one, red dots appeared beside the paintings. By mid-evening, all 7 had sold. Tom approached Sophia with a smile that told her the news before he even spoke. "Sold out again," he confirmed. "And there's more. The Westside Contemporary curator wants 3 pieces for their upcoming exhibition. A magazine wants to do a feature article. And I've had requests from 2 galleries in other cities interested in showing your work." Sophia listened, trying to absorb the reality of what was happening. 6 months ago, she had been selling paintings in the park, desperate to fund life-saving treatment. Now people were competing to buy her art, to write about it, to include it in museum exhibitions. "I need a minute," she said, stepping away from the crowd. She found a quiet corner of the gallery and took a deep breath, steadying herself. Across the room, she could see Rosa speaking animatedly with a group of well-dressed women who had purchased one of the larger paintings for their corporate collection. Her mother looked years younger, the worry lines that had become so pronounced during Sophia's illness now softened by joy and relief. Nearby, Tom was deep in conversation with the museum curator, occasionally gesturing toward Sophia's work with the quiet confidence of someone who had recognized its value from the beginning. And scattered throughout the gallery were strangers whose lives had been touched, in ways large or small, by her art. People who had connected with her story, who had found something of their own experience reflected in her paintings. Sophia closed her eyes briefly, overwhelmed by gratitude. For Tom, who had walked into her life at exactly the right moment. For her mother, whose love and support had never wavered. For the doctors and nurses who had treated not just her cancer but her whole person. For her own body, which had fought so hard to heal. And perhaps most of all, for art itself. The gift that had sustained her through the darkest times and now offered a path forward into whatever came next. A young woman approached her hesitantly, breaking into her thoughts. "Excuse me, are you Sophia? The artist?" Sophia nodded, smiling. "Yes, I am. I just wanted to tell you. I'm going through treatment too. Breast cancer. I saw your work online and had to come tonight." The woman gestured toward the painting of medical equipment transforming into flowers. "That one? It made me feel like maybe there's beauty waiting on the other side of all this. Like maybe I'll be more than just a patient again someday." "You will be," Sophia said with absolute conviction. "The cancer is part of your story, but it's not the whole story." Not even close, the woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. For the art, for the hope. It matters so much." As she walked away, Sophia felt something settle inside her, a sense of purpose clearer than anything she'd experienced before. Her art wasn't just about self-expression anymore. It was a bridge between experiences, a way to transform suffering into connection, isolation into community. She rejoined the crowd, moving from group to group, answering questions, accepting congratulations, but most importantly, listening to the cancer survivors who saw their own journeys reflected in her work, to the medical professionals who spoke of using art therapy with their patients, to the family members of those still fighting, who found comfort in seeing illness rendered not just truthfully, but with dignity and grace. Late in the evening, as the crowd began to thin, Tom appeared at her side. "How are you holding up? Ready to call it a night?" Sophia shook her head. "Not yet. I want to remember every minute of this." Tom smiled, understanding. "It's just the beginning, you know. Your first solo exhibition, but definitely not your last. The way people have responded to your work. It's special, Sophia. The kind of connection most artists spend decades trying to achieve." "I know," she replied softly. "I feel it too." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the remaining guests move among the paintings. Finally, Tom spoke again. "There's something else. Something I've been considering since your work started selling. I'd like to establish a foundation, a fund for artists facing medical crises. Your story could be the inspiration, the template for helping others in similar situations." Sophia turned to him, surprised. "A foundation? That sounds huge." "It would start small," Tom acknowledged. "But with the right backing, the right story, your story, it could grow into something significant." a way to ensure that talent isn't lost because of medical bills or lack of resources during illness. The idea resonated deeply with Sophia. She thought of all the talented classmates she'd known, many struggling financially even without a health crisis to deal with. How many voices were silenced? How many visions lost because illness and art seemed incompatible? "I'd want to be involved," she said slowly. "Not just as a name or a face for fundraising, but in the actual work. Meeting the artists, helping choose recipients." "Of course," Tom agreed. "It would be your foundation as much as mine. A partnership." 6 months after Sophia's successful solo exhibition, spring returned to the city. Trees that had stood bare through winter now burst with pale green leaves, and the park where she had once sold paintings to fund her treatment was filled with flowers and hopeful visitors. On a bright Saturday morning, Sophia stood at the entrance to that same park feeling both strange and familiar. So much had changed since those desperate days, yet the core of who she was remained the same, perhaps stronger, more defined, like a sculpture revealed by the careful removal of everything extraneous. "Ready?" Tom asked, standing beside her with a clipboard and a coffee. Sophia nodded, taking a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." They walked together toward the central lawn where volunteers were setting up tables, hanging banners, and arranging displays. The colorful sign at the entrance read, "First Annual Canvas of Hope Foundation Art Fair, supporting artists facing health challenges." What had begun as a casual conversation on the night of Sophia's exhibition had grown into something real and tangible. The Canvas of Hope Foundation was now officially launched, a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting artists facing medical crises. Tom had provided the initial funding and business expertise, while Sophia contributed her story and her growing influence in the art world. Today marked their first public event, an art fair showcasing the work of 5 artists currently receiving foundation grants. Each had their own health challenge, from cancer to multiple sclerosis to traumatic injury recovery. Each had a unique artistic voice that might have been silenced without support. "I'm nervous," Sophia admitted as they approached the main tent. "What if nobody comes? What if we can't sell their work?" Tom smiled at her concern. "The same fears you had in this very park a year ago. And look how that turned out." He had a point. In the months since her exhibition, Sophia's career had continued to flourish. Her work now hung in 2 museums, several corporate collections, and private homes across the country. She had been featured in 3 art magazines and interviewed on a popular podcast about creativity and resilience. Most importantly, she remained cancer-free, though still attending regular checkups with Dr. Chen. "Besides," Tom added, "we already have a good turnout promised. The gallery sent invitations to all our best collectors, and the hospital foundation is bringing a group as well." Sophia nodded, letting her worry fade. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about the 5 artists who had been given a chance just as she had been. Her responsibility now was to make sure their work received the attention it deserved. Inside the main tent, the artists were already setting up their displays, each one different in style and medium. Lily, a young sculptor whose rare blood disorder required ongoing transfusions, was arranging delicate wire figures that seemed to dance in the air. Carlos, recovering from a stroke that had forced him to learn to paint with his non-dominant hand, was hanging vibrant abstracts that pulsed with energy and determination. "Sophia," called a voice from across the space, "we need your opinion on the placement for the ceramics." As she moved to help, Sophia felt a deep sense of rightness. This was where she belonged, not just making her own art, but helping create spaces where other voices could be heard, other visions shared. The fair opened at noon, and to Sophia's relief and delight, people began arriving immediately. Some were familiar faces from the gallery world. Others were medical professionals Tom had invited, and many were simply park visitors curious about the colorful tents and displays. Sophia moved among the crowd, introducing artists to potential buyers, explaining the foundation's mission, sharing her own story when it seemed helpful. She had become comfortable with her role as both artist and advocate, finding that the 2 aspects of her identity strengthened rather than diminished each other. "Excuse me," said a shy voice behind her. "Are you Sophia Martinez?" Sophia turned to find a teenage girl standing there looking nervous but determined. She was thin, with the unmistakable pallor of someone undergoing treatment, and wore a colorful headscarf similar to the one Sophia had worn during her own chemotherapy. "Yes, I am," Sophia replied with a warm smile. "And you are?" "Anna," the girl said. I brought something to show you." She opened a folder she was carrying and carefully removed a sketch, a remarkably skilled portrait of a young woman looking out a hospital window, her reflection in the glass showing not her current appearance but her healthy self, whole and strong. "This is beautiful," Sophia said, genuinely impressed. "The technique, the concept, it's really powerful work." Anna blushed. "It's inspired by your paintings. My art teacher showed us your exhibition catalog. I never knew you could make art about this." She gestured vaguely toward herself, encompassing her illness without naming it. "Not just about it," Sophia corrected gently. "Through it. Using it rather than being used by it." The girl nodded, understanding instantly. "Exactly." That's exactly it. They talked for several minutes about Anna's treatment, her art studies, her dreams for the future. Sophia introduced her to Tom, who looked at her sketch with the same serious attention he gave to established artists. By the time Anna left, she had information about applying for a foundation grant and an invitation to attend a workshop Sophia would be leading at the hospital the following month. Watching her leave, Sophia felt a surge of emotion too complex to name. Gratitude, purpose, a sense of things coming full circle, all of these and more. "That," Tom said quietly, "is why we're doing this." Sophia nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The rest of the day passed in a blur of conversations, sales, and connections made. By late afternoon, most of the artists had sold at least one piece, with Lily's wire sculptures proving especially popular. The foundation had collected donations, contact information from potential supporters, and most importantly, applications from 3 more artists in need. As the event wound down and volunteers began dismantling displays, Sophia took a moment to step away from the bustle. She walked to a quiet spot beneath a large oak tree. Coincidentally, the same bench where she had rested during her first day selling paintings in the park. So much had changed since then. Her health, her career, her understanding of what art could be and do in the world. Yet sitting here, she could almost feel herself as she had been that day, frightened, determined, unaware of how a chance encounter would transform everything. "There you are," came Rosa's voice, breaking into her thoughts. Her mother had been helping at the information booth all day, proudly telling Sophia's story to anyone who would listen. "Are you hiding from your adoring public?" Sophia laughed. "Just taking a breather." "Sit with me." Rosa joined her on the bench, immediately kicking off her shoes with a sigh of relief. "My feet are killing me. But what a wonderful day, Mija. You should be very proud." "We should all be proud," Sophia corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, or Tom, or Dr. Chen, or everyone else who helped along the way." "That's true," Rosa acknowledged. "But it was your paintings that started it all. Your talent, your courage to keep creating even when you were so sick." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching people stroll by, families with children, couples holding hands, friends laughing together, ordinary people living ordinary lives, each with their own invisible struggles and joys. "I've been thinking about Dad today," Sophia said suddenly. Her father had died when she was 12, a sudden heart attack that had upended their world and left Rosa to raise Sophia alone. Rosa's expression softened. "He would be so proud of you, so amazed by what you've accomplished." "I think he would have liked Tom," Sophia continued. "They're similar in some ways. That quiet strength, that belief in art as something essential rather than decorative." "Yes," Rosa agreed. "Very similar." She gave Sophia a sidelong glance. "Speaking of Tom, he mentioned you might be teaching a regular class at the Art Institute this fall. Once your next exhibition is complete." Sophia nodded. "They've offered me a position, just one class to start, working with advanced students. I'm excited about it, scared too, but mostly excited." "Teacher, artist, foundation director," Rosa listed, smiling. "You're building quite a life for yourself." "A life I almost didn't have," Sophia reminded her quietly. Rosa reached over and took her daughter's hand, squeezing it tightly. They both knew how close they had come to a different outcome. The doctors had later told them that without prompt treatment, Sophia's aggressive form of lymphoma might have been fatal within months. "But you did have it," Rosa said firmly. "You do have it. And you're using it so beautifully, Mija. Before Sophia could respond, they were interrupted by Tom's arrival. He looked tired but satisfied, his normally pristine shirt now rumpled, his hair mussed from running his hands through it, a habit when he was thinking deeply. "Success," he announced, dropping onto the bench beside them. "Final count, 27 artworks sold, $15,000 in additional donations, and all 5 artists want to stay involved with the foundation going forward." "That's amazing," Sophia said, genuinely pleased. "Better than we hoped." "Much better," Tom agreed. "And I've been thinking, we should make this a quarterly event. Different artists each time, rotating through various locations around the city. Build momentum, raise awareness." His energy was infectious despite the long day. That was one of the things Sophia most appreciated about him, his genuine enthusiasm for artists and their work.
His belief in the power of art to transform both individual lives and communities. Quarterly might be ambitious to start, she cautioned.
"Maybe twice a year for now. While we're still figuring things out." "Always the practical one," Tom teased. "But you're probably right. We should make sure we're doing it well before we expand." Rosa stood, slipping her shoes back on with a grimace. "While you two plan the future of the art world, I'm going to help finish the cleanup. Some of us still have to work tomorrow, you know." As she walked away, Tom shifted slightly to face Sophia. "She's remarkable, your mother. The strength she's shown through all of this." "I know," Sophia agreed. "She's always been my rock. Even before I got sick, raising me on her own, working multiple jobs so I could take art classes." "She reminds me of my mother," Tom said softly. "The same quiet determination, the same unwavering support." Sophia looked at him curiously. In all their months of working together, Tom had rarely spoken about his personal life or background. She knew he had been married once years ago and had no children. Beyond that, he remained something of a mystery. "You never talk about your family," she observed. Tom was silent for a moment, his gaze distant. "No, I don't," he finally acknowledged. "Old habits. When you've been sick in certain ways, people look at you differently if they know, so you learn to keep parts of yourself private." Sophia waited, sensing there was more he wanted to say. "I had leukemia," he said finally, "when I was in art school. Not quite as serious as your lymphoma, but serious enough. I had to drop out for treatment, lost my scholarship. My mother worked herself to exhaustion to pay the medical bills." "I didn't know," Sophia said softly. Tom smiled slightly. "How could you? I don't talk about it often. It was a long time ago. But when I saw you in the park that day, with your paintings and that sign about cancer treatment, it was like looking at a mirror from the past." Suddenly, so many things made sense to Sophia. Tom's immediate interest in her work, his generosity, his commitment to the foundation. It hadn't just been about her talent or her situation. It had been about recognition, about seeing his own past reflected in her present. "Is that why you helped me?" she asked, not accusingly but wanting to understand. "Initially, perhaps," Tom admitted. "It hit close to home. But Sophia, I wouldn't have represented your work if I didn't truly believe in it. I've spent 20 years building my gallery's reputation. I don't compromise on the art I show, no matter how compelling the story behind it might be." She nodded, accepting this. She had seen enough of the art world by now to know that Tom's standards were indeed exacting, his eye for quality uncompromising. "What happened after your treatment?" she asked. "How did you get from there to owning a gallery?" Tom leaned back, gazing up at the oak leaves rustling gently above them. "My old professor from art school. He saw my work at a small cafe exhibition similar to how I saw yours in the park. He introduced me to people, helped me get a scholarship to return to school. After graduation, I worked at galleries learning the business side, saved everything I could, opened my own small space 10 years later." "And now you're paying it forward," Sophia observed. "Trying to," Tom agreed. "Though what we're building with the foundation goes beyond what anyone did for me. It's more systematic, more sustainable. If we do this right, it could help artists for generations." The way he said "we," naturally, as if their partnership were a permanent arrangement, gave Sophia a warm feeling of belonging, of shared purpose. "I should get back," she said finally, standing and stretching. "Rosa will think we've abandoned her with all the cleanup." Tom stood as well, but before they could walk back toward the tents, he touched her arm lightly. "There's something else I wanted to discuss with you, a new opportunity." Sophia raised an eyebrow questioningly. A gallery in Paris has expressed interest in showing your work, Tom continued. A very prestigious space, excellent location. They're planning an exhibition on art and healing, similar to what the West Side Contemporary did but on a larger scale with international artists. Paris? Sophia repeated, stunned. As in, France? Tom laughed at her expression. Yes, that Paris. They want 4 to 6 pieces and they would cover the costs for you to attend the opening. It would be your first international showing. Sophia felt slightly dizzy at the prospect. A year ago, she had been selling paintings in the park to pay for chemotherapy. Now she was being offered an exhibition in Paris. When would this be? She asked, trying to sound professional rather than overwhelmed. Next spring, Tom replied. Plenty of time to create new work if you want, or we could send pieces from your existing portfolio. Next spring. The timing struck Sophia forcefully. That would be almost exactly 2 years since her diagnosis, 2 years that had transformed everything about her life and art. I'd want to create something new, she said decisively. Something specific to the theme, the location. Tom nodded, clearly pleased with her response. That's what I told them you'd say. They're holding the space for you. No pressure to commit immediately. Think about it. Discuss it with your mother. They began walking back toward the event area, where Rosa and several volunteers were folding tables and packing unsold artwork into protective cases. Sophia's mind was already racing with ideas for the Paris exhibition. Images forming, colors blending, concepts taking shape. You know, Tom said as they walked, when I first saw your work in the park, I thought I was helping you, offering you a lifeline when you needed it most. You were, Sophia assured him. Perhaps, he acknowledged. But what I didn't expect was how much you would end up helping me, reminding me why I got into this business in the first place, rekindling my belief that art really can change lives, not just through the market value of a canvas, but through the human connections it creates. Sophia understood exactly what he meant. Her art had begun as personal expression, become a means of survival, and evolved into something that connected her to others in ways she could never have anticipated. As they reached the main tent, Sophia paused, taking in the scene, her mother chatting with Lily, the young sculptor, Carlos carefully packing his remaining paintings, volunteers counting money and sorting paperwork, ordinary people from the park stopping to ask questions about the foundation. All of this from one chance encounter. One person who stopped to really look at her work when she needed it most. Ready for whatever comes next? Tom asked quietly beside her. Sophia nodded, feeling the familiar surge of creative energy that had sustained her through treatment and recovery, that continued to drive her forward into an increasingly expansive future. Absolutely, she said, whatever comes next. The sun was beginning to set as they finished packing up the last of the displays. Golden light filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the grass where Sophia had once sat with her modest collection of paintings, hoping desperately for sales. Now she stood in nearly the same spot, surrounded by a community that had formed around art and healing, purpose and connection. Rosa on one side, Tom on the other, and ahead of her, possibilities she was only beginning to imagine. Sophia took a deep breath of the spring air, feeling its sweetness fill her lungs. A year ago, simply breathing had sometimes been an effort. Now each breath felt like a gift, each day an opportunity to create something meaningful. As they left the park together, artist, mentor, and mother, Sophia glanced back once at the place where everything had changed. Where desperation had led to hope, illness to healing, isolation to community. Where a single dad had walked by and done the unimaginable, not just buying her art, but seeing her potential and helping her build a future she could never have created alone. Thank you, she whispered, though whether to Tom, to the universe, or to the mysterious forces that had brought them together in this particular place at that particular moment, even Sophia herself couldn't say. Ahead of her stretched a life reclaimed and reimagined, canvas after canvas waiting to be filled, story after story waiting to be told. Her own, yes, but also the stories of others who would find their way to the foundation, whose art might have been lost without the support it provided. Sophia stepped forward into the gathering twilight, ready for all of it. The next painting, the next exhibition, the next life touched by the unexpected ripples of one simple act of kindness, One moment of truly being seen, ready above all, to transform the darkness she had faced into light for others, just as someone had once done for her.